Hi, David.
Hi.
We are so happy to have you here in the Ciudad de las Ideas.
Oh, it makes me blush.
And uh, and you just mentioned that you are Jewish
I am, yes. I am Jewish.
and that you just wore this
Yeah.
necklace with with the Star of David. So we would like to ask you, why did you wear it?
Well, although I'm Jewish, I'm culturally Jewish. I don't believe in the religion. I was not brought up with the customs or anything like that. But there's been an upsurge of anti-Semitism. And I, th- I think it's important to make a statement, right? So, people looking at me, they don't diagnose my Jewishness. And it's important for us to declare in solidarity, that we're Jews. Um,
You mean after Pittsburgh also?
Actually, earlier, it was after the Charlottesville March, where these white supremacists were chanting, "Jews will not replace us," that's when I started wearing this. And, Pittsburgh, and there have been many, many, many other incidents, smaller incidents of vandalism, of violence, verbal and physical violence against Jews in the United States, and of course not just the United States. And this is part of a much larger issue of intolerance and racism and xenophobia. So my wearing of this isn't specifically advocating for Jews. It's advocating for justice. And it's advocating against racism and against xenophobia and against all of these awful things which are really resurgent right now. I think we're at a very dangerous moment in time. Oh yes, I do. If you look worldwide at the rise of right-wing extremist movements, neo-fascist movements, of white supremacist movements, and totalitarian regimes in Poland, in Hungary, in Brazil, for Christ's sake, and in North America, in the United States. We need to take this really, really seriously. We're at a strange historical moment, and everyone, people like to imagine that we're all safe. People have short memories, right? The Holocaust was yesterday. The Rwanda genocide was even more recently. The Cambodian genocide, the genocides going on right now in Sudan, and the persecution of Rohingya. People are capable of awful things, and unless we remain very, very vigilant, there's no way to protect ourselves from that. And a lot of people just take it for granted. It can't happen. It can't happen here. Well, that's what German Jews and German gypsies said. It can't happen here. They counted on the protection of their constitution during the Weimar era, and constitutions are fragile. Social institutions are fragile. They can all be broken.
Well, it was a kind of a shaking moment when, in the heart of the United States, the place where Jews feel the most safe
Yeah.
in the whole world, maybe.
Yeah.
It's not Europe, it's not France, and then Pittsburgh happens. So, what do you think about that?
Well, it's a wake-up call. Yeah. Now, because of the research that I do, I mainly research dehumanization in relation to genocide and mass violence. Because of the research I do, I really keep track of what white supremacist groups in the United States are thinking and saying. And basically, for many of these groups, Jews are the main target. They see Jews as responsible for promoting immigration. They see Jews as responsible for immigration from Latin America into the United States. They see Jews as responsible for the civil rights movement in the United States. So Jews are seen as like the evil masterminds behind all of this stuff. So it didn't surprise me that something like this would happen, right? And these things, they're just not well known. I mean, Americans don't understand anti-Semitism. They think it's about religion. One of the things I have to explain to my students is anti-Semitism is about race. The Nazis didn't care what religion you had. It was your racial classification. And therefore, this is part of this much bigger problem of racism.
So what's going on in the States?
Well, what's going on in the States? Let's start with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a symptom. He's not the real disease, right? So without his supporters and his voters, he'd be nothing, right? Just some crummy businessman. What Trump has done is he's tapped on something which has been suppressed in American culture, but which was there. So it was socially unacceptable, almost everywhere, to make explicit racist remarks or misogynistic remarks or xenophobic remarks. People would do it in the privacy of their own homes, when they're drinking in a bar together, when they're out on a hunting expedition. But they wouldn't air it publicly because it would solicit disapproval. What Trump did is he gave these people permission to express their real feelings. And that's very powerful. In a way, it was liberating for them. They could actually say what they believed. So he let the genie out of the bottle. And now it's going to be hard to put it back in. So even if he's not reelected, these people have come out, right? They've declared themselves. They've developed mutual solidarity. And I think we have some very rough times ahead. We live in a very, very divided country, right? The divisions have always been there, but now they're in the open.
Now, a lot of people, a lot of countries in the world are led by totalitarian, by authoritative persons, like the ones you spoke about. Why is that?
You know, I wish I knew. I wish I knew why this is happening now. And there may be a number of different reasons for this. But the theory I gave had to do with the way that these people convince us to support them, to do terrible things, to participate in our own oppression and in the oppression of others. And here's the thing. These movements, and let's take the most extreme genocidal movements, people believe when they participate in them that they're doing something good, that they're doing something morally right, that they're saving the world. Make no mistake, the Nazis thought they were saving the world. In every genocide you see this. So if you can find a way to appeal to those sentiments, and this sort of thing often happens in situations of rapid social change, where people who were privileged in the past are losing their privilege, right? Where men are having to realize that women can do just what they do. That people of color, whites are forced to realize that people of color can do just what they do. So the roles are changing, and a lot of people feel displaced. And then they start longing for a past, often a past that never was. So you get this nostalgia, make America great again. Every movement like this tends to have a mythological past, a past where everything was fine. And the leader is going to return us to that wonderful past. Americans have illusions about this, right? That when was everything fine for everyone? There wasn't any such a time. And the Germans swallowed that as well, and the Hungarians are swallowing that as well. It's a very powerful story that I really wanted to emphasize in my talk, that we're all vulnerable to. We're all potential victims of manipulation. You know, most people who commit genocidal acts are just ordinary human beings. Ordinary human beings in an altered state of consciousness because of their longing to be saved from the vulnerability that's part of being a human being.
What about Mexico?
Yeah, I don't know that much about Mexican politics. After I gave my talk, I was told by various people that your recent election, actually my explanation fit what went on in the recent election. Unfortunately, I'm sorry that that's the case. No, I don't know too much about what's going on in Mexico, and I try not to talk about things that I'm ignorant of. So you could tell me.
Now, I often think that in the Holocaust, the people that saved Jews, etc., they are an abnormality.
That's right.
It is not normal.
Yeah.
What is your thought about this?
No, isn't normal. So there's a lesson for us here. When you see things moving towards fascism, as I do in my country, it's easy to be brave now because the price isn't high. It's much more difficult to be brave when the price is high, when things go further down the road. So let's all be brave now. Let's stand up. Let's stand up to racism. Let's stand up to oppression. Let's stand up to xenophobia. Let's make our voices heard, because it's a very rare person who is able to stand up when the cost is very high. I probably couldn't, right?
Uh, would you stand up even if your life was at stake?
I don't know. I think I would be too much of a coward, to be honest. I think it's a rare human being who's able to do that. And none of us really know until it happens. We don't know what we're capable of till it and of course, people have a lot of illusions. They think, well, if I lived in Germany in 1939, I would have. No, you probably would have been really pleased with how the Nazis had gotten 100% unemployment and improved the economy and propelling the nation into a great future. Most people are like that. It's a very outstanding and exceptional person who has that kind of courage and that kind of insight, not to be bribed and not to be so frightened that they can't do what morality says they should.
David, what is your burning question?
I have so many burning questions. My burning question. So normally, this isn't what I normally talk about. I do sometimes. So my topics of research for the last 10 years has been dehumanization. And I suppose the burning question here is, how is it possible for human beings to think of other human beings as subhuman animals, which we find just regularly in genocide and episodes of mass violence? This is something I've been studying a lot. I wrote a book about it, which came out in 2011, called Less Than Human. And I'm working on 2 books now, one called On Inhumanity and the other called Making Monsters. And so I think in terms of my work, that's the main one.
What is the answer?
Oh, it would take me several hours, I think, to explain that.
Maybe one.
It's very complicated because dehumanization involves features of human psychology. You have to come at it from different ways. You have to look at what is it about the human mind that allows us to do that. So, an SS officer looking at a Jew would see someone that outwardly resembles any person that they would consider a human being, but yet they would see them as an Untermensch, a subhuman. Well, how does that work? And it turns out that psychologically we have this tendency to attribute sort of an essence to people which may be different from how they appear. So think of movies like vampire movies, where the vampire looks human, but the idea is they're not really human. And we, the viewers, can go along with that perfectly well because it corresponds to our psychology, right? Now, that's part of what allows us to dehumanize. So the SS officer can look at the Jew, so it looks like a human being, but it's a counterfeit human being. Inside, it's a monster, it's an animal, it's a rat, it's something like that. That's part of it, but there also you have to consider the political forces at work and the cultural forces at work. So it's a very complicated topic, and it hasn't been studied very much, strangely, right? My 2011 book is the only I think it's correct to say, well, I know it's correct to say in the English language, it's the only single author book trying to pull everything together about dehumanization, the history, to theorize it, to see what anthropology says about it, what psychology says about it, what biology says about it, and so on. So, really important topic in my view.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for your wonderful questions.